To today's webinar. We're recording. Great. Welcome to today's webinar on Indigenous knowledge and science. My name is Jeanette Menzies and I'm Canada's ambassador to Iceland. I'm thrilled to invite you to this Arctic webinar series that is part of the 75th anniversary celebrations between Canada and Iceland. A few points for me before I turn to our opening remarks. This webinar series is a partnership between the Icelandic Embassy in Canada, the Canadian Embassy in Iceland, Polar Knowledge Canada, and the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network. We've already had a very successful webinar on gender equality in the Arctic. This is our second one on Indigenous knowledge and science. And I wanted to say that this particular webinar was recommended by Canada's Governor General, Mary Simon, as an important one that we consider and that we feature in the context of this series. Future ones will also be occurring throughout the 2022 year on issues around food and innovation and climate science in the months to come. I wanted to thank SmartICE for joining us today and for actually leading a really dynamic discussion. This is a really unique way that we're doing this that involves participants from different locations. So we ask everyone to be patient with technology, but I think we're well set with a few backup plans as needed. Without further ado, I would like to turn the microphone to our opening speaker, Madeline Redfern, who many of you know. Madeline is an Indigenous woman who is originally from Iqaluit, Nunavut, and a graduate of Ikpiarjuk Law School with an LLB from University of Victoria. I want to note that she's the first Inuit to be given a Supreme Court of Canada clerkship. She's a businesswoman and has a strong social advocate, for transformative initiatives. And I've seen that she's been involved in a whole number of initiatives over the years. I encourage you to look at her bio. Just briefly before I turn to Madeline, I wanted to flag that we have over, close to 90 people on the call today. We have 200 people registered. I took a quick look at the attendance list and I'm so pleased that we have such a diverse group of people attending from Indigenous organizations, from government, universities in Canada, Iceland, and elsewhere, museums, foundations, NGOs, and I hope a lot of youth. Maybe I'll wait until later on. I do want to find out where everyone's sitting because it's always interesting to see where everyone's from, but I'm going to wait. I'll turn the microphone to Madeline. Welcome, Madeline, and thanks again for starting off our exciting webinar today.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone. I'm very honored today to welcome you to this important discussion on Indigenous knowledge and Western science in a conversation with folks from SmartICE. In our discussion, we will have the opportunity to hear from individuals across Inuit Nunangat communities. I understand we will be exploring Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit, Inuit knowledge and values of safe ice travel, Inuit ways of knowing and learning in the context of operator training, Pilimmaksaqniq Sikulirijimik, and the co-creation of community ice travel safety maps, Sikumik Qaujimajjuti. The conversations today will shed light on the importance of Inuit knowledge and science and SmartICE's work in the communities. SmartICE will highlight the power that elders, community members, and the younger generation hold. We will see how knowledge sharing, the teamwork is utilized to adapt to unpredictable ice conditions and therefore strengthening the community's resiliency and well-being across Inuit Nunangat region. At the core of their work, SmartICE, those involved in their programs will demonstrate how science and traditional teachings and local knowledge can work together to solve dynamic problems with the innovative and community-focused solutions. So again, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to welcome everyone to today's session, and I will hand this over now to Trevor.
Welcome from Ikpiarjuk in the Mittimatalik region of Nunavut. I'm here with my SmartICE colleagues this morning. We're training some operators in the community to work with SmartICE. I wish you were here this morning to look out over the sea ice and to see the the dog teams out on the ice and to see people traveling around on the sea ice and in the community. It's a beautiful sunny day, and it's a great day to be in the communities. This is also an opportunity for me to say thank you to all of the communities and our partners who are at the core of SmartICE, because it's their incredible contribution that has made our social enterprise so successful over the last couple of years. Next slide. On this map, just next slide, please.
Working on it. There we go.
Thank you, Per. On this map, you can see all the locations where SmartICE is partnering with communities, including the yellow dots. Those are Inuit across Inuit Nunangat, and they represent coastal sea ice communities. The blue dots represent First Nations and Métis communities in the Northern Territories, and those communities travel on lake and river ice, so freshwater ice. And we also want to use this map to introduce you to some of the staff, SmartICE staff that you'll hear from today. And they're located, the red dots. So starting off in the bottom right in Nunainguk is Rex Hallwell, who lives in Nain, but is actually here with me in the community training community operators. Then next, if we move up towards the north, towards Baffin Island, Andrew Ariak, who's on the call today, he lives in Mittimatalik, and you'll hear from him later on. Just across from Mittimatalik is the community that I'm in, Ikpiarjuk, and here we have Olivia and Mishak, who are community coordinators. And then farther to the west, Leanne in Gjoa Haven in the Qaujimajatuqangit region of Nunavut. The other people that you see are Lynn and Becky and Catherine and Gillian, and they're located in our southern offices in St. John's, Ottawa, Calgary, and Victoria. So right now I'm going to introduce a short video around that sort of tells the story a bit about SmartICE, what we do in communities, why we do it, and then we'll start to get into the conversation. So next slide, please.
SmartICE is a social enterprise that empowers Indigenous communities across Canada's north to make more informed decisions before traveling on ice. Because of climate change, that ice is becoming thinner and less predictable. It is becoming more dangerous to travel on. Enter SmartICE as an internationally recognized, award-winning climate solution. It combines Indigenous knowledge, sensor technology, and satellite imagery to help communities safely navigate hazardous ice. Our social enterprise business model commits to maximizing social impact and creating positive community change, while collaboratively delivering ice information services with communities for communities across the Arctic. SmartICE puts innovative technology into the hands of communities so they can adapt their travel plans to unprecedented ice conditions. It trains local operators to use SmartICE sensors to monitor ice thickness along community travel routes. Operators are trained to deploy autonomous sensors called smart buoys to monitor ice conditions near and far from their communities. Operators also run regular ice thickness surveys along community trails using a SmartICE, which is pulled behind a snowmobile. The community receives this travel safety information on smartphones and computers through the internet platform Siku, as well as local radio and posted maps in public places. SmartICE is assembling the smart buoy sensors in our Northern Production Center in Nain, Nunainguk, where we employ Inuit youth from our Employment Readiness and Technology Development Program. SmartICE trains Inuit to be producers, operators, and technicians of its technology, enhancing literacy and essential skills, as well as technical skills, using an approach grounded in Indigenous ways of knowing and learning. SmartICE training programs are culturally and contextually responsive, supporting Inuit to thrive and prosper. SmartICE convenes community management committees made up of elders, youth, and community representatives to decide how SmartICE should operate in each of its service communities and to make recommendations on other ways that SmartICE can support safe travel. For example, the Community Management Committee in Pond Inlet has documented its accumulated wisdom of ice travel safety, so SmartICE can help young and inexperienced users stay safe through the adoption of traditional knowledge and skills. Their travel safety posters and maps, for instance, teach young hunters how to plan, prepare, identify, and test the ice for safety, and to be aware of frequently dangerous ice areas during different seasons. By sharing the community's accumulated ice knowledge in these new ways, SmartICE is enabling younger generations to adapt to unpredictable ice changes while also strengthening community resilience and well-being. With current and planned operations in over 30 communities across Inuit Nunangat and Northern Territories, SmartICE continues to address new community needs for ice monitoring services. Through novel actions and social innovations, SmartICE is harnessing the vast potential of Indigenous women and men, especially youth, to embrace science, technology, and traditional knowledge as a vehicle for sustainable employment, economic development, and well-being in their communities. Our goal is to work with every community that needs our services. We are incredibly grateful for the contributions from our many community, academic, government, and industry partners. Together, we are creating world-class climate change adaptation tools and social impacts.
Next slide, please. So as you've seen in the video, SmartICE, of course, is well known for the technology that it uses and puts into the hands of communities to help them to adapt to these really unpredictable and unprecedented changes in ice conditions. But I also want to stress that it's Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit or Inuit knowledge and values and worldview. Sometimes that word is shortened to IQ in the conversation. It's ultimately that IQ that strengthens resilience to changing climate and society. And of course, this is the same for Aboriginal peoples across the world, that their knowledge is so important in fighting and adapting to climate change. Next slide. It was our Community Management Committee in Mittimatalik, and you see a photograph of the community here with the sea ice forming in the background. It was the SmartICE Community Management Committee there called Sikumik that first asked us to help them document their IQ. In the following conversation you're about to hear, our Director of Knowledge Co-Production with our Regional Operations Lead, Andrew Ariak from Mittimatalik, and Olivia Kamenik, the Knowledge Co-Production Coordinator for Ikpiarjuk, about the process and importance of collecting sea ice IQ in their communities. Next slide.
So back in 2017, the SmartICE Community Management Committee in Mittimatalik called Sikumik were discussing their concerns about the next generation lacking the language and knowledge to travel on the sea ice. Andrew, Eric, and I have been working with Sikumik over the last 4 years to document their Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit for safe sea ice travel. Andrew, maybe you can explain a bit about what we've done in Mittimatalik.
Sure thing, Catherine. Sikumik wanted to start off first with documenting their local sea ice terms. Sikumik didn't want just a dictionary. They wanted a booklet with pictures for each term so youth could also see what different ice type look like. This is a page from booklet showing Pilimmaksaqniq. These are areas of stable ice where cracks in the ice begin and end. They are safe places to cross when cracks get too wide, and these locations are important to share with the community. We hire local youth artist named James Uqsuqtuuq to help us out because there are some terms that were difficult to photograph of, and sometimes drawings were helpful to further explain the term, like Pilimmaksaqniq. In his drawing, he shows how the snowmobile can drive between the cracks. We have 67 different terms of ice in this booklet with photographs and illustration. And this spring, 400 copies of the booklet will be distributed for each household in my community. Sikumik shares so much great information. Again, we work with Jamesy to create posters for the community about preparing to travel on the ice and what to know as you travel on the ice. The posters teach you what to look for when you come to a crack in the ice and how to cross it safely. And in this poster, there's an image of a harpoon informing us how to check the ice. So one strike, if it goes through, it's not safe. 2 strikes and it doesn't go through, it's safe to walk on, but no snowmobile. And 3 strikes and it doesn't go through, it's safe to travel on by snowmobile.
Andrew, looking back now, why do you think it was important to write down these words?
Previously, our elders would have shared Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit orally and taught us as we traveled together on the sea ice. But now with school and work, we don't have the same amount of time with our elders to learn this IQ. I love being out on the land, and as a SmartICE operator, I need this knowledge to be able to travel safely to monitor the ice conditions for my community. Experienced hunters in my community know where the sea ice is dangerous and how it changes by season. But this knowledge is in their head. They have the mental map. So we work with Sikumik to share this IQ on paper map. I was then trained in GIS to create maps like this one for my community. The red in the map shows where the sea ice is always dangerous, and the yellow is where it becomes dangerous in the spring. I know where the sea ice is dangerous, and I can better understand hunters describing the ice conditions when on the radio or at the Hunters and Trappers organization.
That's awesome. Thanks, Andrew. I put a link in the chat for a website where people can take a closer look at some of the IQ products. When other communities saw the sea ice IQ work being done in Mittimatalik, they asked SmartICE to help them do similar work. And so we've now hired new coordinators to expand this work to 4 other communities across Inuit Nunangat.
Next, I'd like to introduce Olivia Qaujimajatuqangit, our Knowledge Co-Production Coordinator from Arctic Bay. Olivia, you held a workshop in November to map the IQ in Arctic Bay. I'm going to share a photograph of the paper map that the elders drew on. Can you tell us a bit more about what we're looking at?
My name is Olivia Qaujimajatuqangit and I'm from Arctic Bay, Nunavut. On this map, you'll see Almighty Inlet, which is a highway for Arctic Bay sea ice users and hunters. The red lines you see are cracks during early spring, and the green lines are leads, which are cracks during the whole ice season. Due to the declining population of Inuit elders in Arctic Bay, I think it is vital for young hunters to have access to this knowledge and wisdom that stems solely from relying on the land for survival, and it connects the young hunters to Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit and our Inuit roots.
Olivia, did you know all this IQ before the project started?
Before the project started, I didn't have much knowledge on Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit. Now, working with SmartICE, I have been able to learn more about IQ from elders during workshops that I facilitate in my community.
So you, Jotny, and Shauna have been in weekly Zoom classes since January, learning how to digitize this IQ on a computer. Why is it important that you're learning these skills and making these maps for your community?
It just makes sense. I live here, I can meet with people when I need to review and edit the maps, and it also allows me to design the maps from an Inuit perspective to make sure that these maps make sense for my community. It gives me greater control. If changes need to be made, I can make them. This IQ belongs in my community. With me doing the maps, this IQ never leaves the community and is managed in the community. I'm really excited to be making maps for Arctic Bay.
Next slide, please. Another way in which SmartICE incorporates IQ is through our community ice travel safety maps. Here we fill an information need identified by communities themselves. So the government of Canada's Canadian Ice Service creates regular sea ice charts like the one you see here on the left. And they're made by experts primarily during the summer and early fall seasons for the benefit of shipping and ice breaking in the Arctic. However, these ice charts are not that useful for community travel on the ice, which occurs mostly obviously in the winter and springtime. So in response, SmartICE initiated the Sikumik Qaujimajjuti project to co-design training curriculum to incorporate IQ and satellite interpretation training to make community ice travel safety maps. In the following conversation, you will hear from Andrew Ariak, Rex Hallwell, and Olivia Kamenik again, talking about the maps they create, as well as Dr. Lynn Moorman, a geospatial literacy expert working with SmartICE at Mount Royal University in Calgary, who has helped to train them, along with Becky Siegel, a remote sensing expert with SmartICE. Next slide.
We are creating sea ice safety maps, and we are training Inuit SmartICE employees to create sea ice safety maps for their communities. The maps are produced weekly when the ice is changing and help with ice safety and awareness. To make maps, we're learning how to combine IQ and GIS and remote sensing skills. We are creating these maps because there are no maps being produced like this that are targeting community needs for sea ice safety for their communities with incorporating IQ. More satellite imagery is available now on the internet, but not everyone is trained to interpret it. It is important that we create these community maps for it to be available at any time of year because it's community-based. And we are training as we go, and we're self-determinated. And the data is controlled and never leaves the community, and it targets community needs in our language. Sea ice is coming a little later and breaking off a little earlier each year, and with the map making for my community, I'll be able to inform in real time sea ice conditions.
Our process for mapping is that we take that gathered IQ, we take observations from the community, and then we also look at satellite imagery. We'll look at two different types. We'll look at what we call optical. That's looking at the land the way our eyes see. That doesn't work very well in winter when it's very dark. So we do have another type of imagery that we use, and that is radar. So it looks very different than what our eyes can see. But once you understand the information that it's showing, we can interpret it and then create the maps. Leanne's going to lead us through that process.
If there is a new area to show or if ice conditions have changed, then we can create a map. The first step is to talk to operators or see if there is any community input about where to map. We use satellite images to do our interpretations for our maps. We use optical and radar, but radar is more important for the winter months because we can get imagery even in the dark season. We like to use Siku and EO browser to look at our satellite imagery, and as a group we like to discuss ice conditions, do group interpretations, and if there's no community input, we decide where to map.
We download our satellite image and bring it into a GIS software. From there, we can enhance the image and begin building layers of the map. We create map features, digitize interpretations that we've made, and if there's any IQ from the community members, we can add that in too. Once we are done digitizing, we can begin creating a final map layout. This is where we add in details of the map, such as scales, legends, logos, safety icons for caution areas, north arrow, and map descriptions. Once the layout is complete, we share the maps with the community through printing and posting around the community, email local contacts, and post on Facebook. This map from February 8th has been my favorite one to work on so far because it had a couple different ice conditions for me to work with. I had to really pay attention to the details to make sure that this map would be as accurate as it could be and to make sure that it was readable to the community. This area has some broken moving ice, which is super important to share with the community because people are using these areas to hunt in and we want everyone to stay safe.
Sikumik Qaujimajjuti SmartICE Sea Ice Safety Map of Mittimatalik area. This map indicates sea ice conditions of my area for this week. Ice has formed, but there are cautionary areas and areas that are not recommended to travel on. On the map, you'll see Mittimatalik, Sina flow edge, Inuqsuqtuuq, caution areas, Manila, rough ice, Nain dangerous, and Uqsuqtuuq Pilimmaksaqniq. These maps are available for my community so they can travel safely on the ice.
So the goal for my mapping, I chose 4 different features that I digitized in my map. The most prominent one, I think, in my opinion, is the red polygons to indicate the Pilimmaksaqniq, or in Nain we call them rattles. Rattles are fast-moving water in the winter that doesn't freeze, and people, can potentially fall through. So, I mean, having that knowledge of people, who are not familiar with the area, to quickly see this map, and if they see these rattles, they know to avoid. And they're also meant to, for the young people who may not have a person who may have taught them this traditional knowledge of IQ. So, I mean, this is great for those young people as well to know, this is where the dangerous areas. Also, it also helps show people, the outer ice limits, that may be safe to use, and then, they have to use a harpoon. We also have a ship that comes through in certain times of the year, so they actually break through the ice. So to have that on my map, it is vital information for people to know how to safely cross the 2 areas that's indicated on my map. They have a pontoon crossing, so that's something good to have on the map for people traveling to and from Nain who have to cross the ship's track, and just for general safety reasons in general.
I feel like really proud doing this work. It really helps out the community, and it's really nice getting feedback from some people saying that having this information is super useful, and it's a nice way for them to feel safe when they're going out traveling, and they know what areas to avoid, and they know if they have to reroute their trails to, if there might be an ice condition that they can't go over or anything like that.
Next slide, please. Just so you know that this is a live discussion, I'm going to identify a mistake I just made. That is not Olivia, that is Leanne below in the last video from Gjoa Haven, who's one of the members of the team making those community ice travel safety maps. As a work integration social enterprise, one of the main social impacts for SmartICE is the training of local Inuit to be the producers, operators, and technicians of our technology. Training Inuit youth is a specific goal because they make up in most communities 50 or 60% of the population in northern communities. Earlier in our video, you heard about our employment readiness program for training Inuit youth in our award-winning Northern Production Center in Nain, Nunainguk. But we also co-designed a community operator training program, the Pilimmaksaqniq Sikulirijimik program, and that's what we're doing here in Arctic Bay. This program incorporates Inuit knowledge, values, and ways of knowing and learning. In the following conversation, our inclusive workforce manager, Gillian Davidge, discusses with Andrew Ariak and Mishak Alarut how these guiding principles are being employed in the training program. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, yeah. No, sorry, you go back one. You got to go back to the video. Back another one. Say that should be a video.
Hello, Andrew and Mishak, and thank you so much for joining me for a conversation to talk about how we can incorporate Inuit societal values and Inuit ways of knowing and learning into our operator training program.
Yeah, hello, my name is Mishak Alarut, and I'm from Arctic Bay, also known as Ikpiarjuk Nunangut. I work part-time with SmartICE as the Community Engagement Coordinator.
Hello, my name is Andrew Ariak, and I'm from Mittimatalik, Inlet Nunangut, and I'm currently the Regional Operations Lead for Reykjavík North Region.
As a framework for our training program, we have been using the 8 guiding principles of Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit. And Mishak, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what these principles are and what they mean.
These Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit principles are important in that they have been thought of by the elders, and because it's not really written down what Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit really means. These are just some of the practical terms that can be used. There's a lot more which are not documented, and there's more Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit that we can learn from, and these are at least written down, and we can actually use them in our daily lives.
Thanks, Mishak. As you know, problem solving is an incredibly important part of being a SmartICE operator. As you're out traveling on the ice, using technical equipment, dealing with safety issues and other situations. And I just wanted to ask each of you how we might incorporate these guiding principles into our operator training program to reinforce problem solving skills.
The importance of serving and providing for family and a community. Community operators provide an important service for their community by gathering and sharing information about sea ice travel, keeping the SmartICE equipment working and being safe on the ice allows the operators to provide this service. There are some points in the training that we focus on the modeling and how we observe our surroundings, and how we practice not with our own equipment, but practice being out there, and also incorporating our IQ. We also demonstrate and talk about problem solving with the group, but then providing real examples for them to work through. Sometimes I purposely disconnect one of the wires, and then I ask one of the operators if they are able to figure out why the equipment is not working. By asking questions, we learn by doing, and working as a team. We also think of solutions and being open to suggestions. And of course, staying calm is a must.
One principle is the Uqsuqtuuq, being innovative and resourceful, because I think it's important to be mentally prepared to look at a problem and feel capable of solving it using whatever resources that are available, and being prepared to open to thinking of different solutions and not giving up, trying different ways and being creative. Like, and Ikpiarjuk too, working together for common cause, and respecting others. Teamwork is important part of the problem solving, like listening and being patient to hear what other people have to offer, working together to solve the problem and not placing blame. For Pilimmaksaqniq as well, development of skills through observation, mentoring, practice, and effort. So problem solving is a skill that we learn by watching others, being given some guidance, and then by trying. And the other thing too, Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit is the first one of the principles, which, you know, even though you feel emotional or you may feel anger or frustration, it's not always necessary to show it to the team, to other members, especially when you're trying to solve a problem, because it will, your anger, your emotion will take over in terms of being creative. You know, when you're angry at something or someone, that anger is overriding all your creative energy. So I think you need to have good relationship, and you know, even though the student may not be, you know, following the training or the course, you still need to be patient and, you know, respect them and not show your emotion all the time. So I think that part should be very important part to have Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit, to work together, to have a good working relationship.
Thank you, Mishak. Next slide. Before we finish our conversation, today, I wanted to say a few things about the importance of a social enterprise approach, and also Inuit societal values, and to mention the National Inuit Strategy on Research. In the beginning, SmartICE began as a community university government partnership, but as more communities wanted to access our services, we had to consider what sort of service model we'd use to expand to other communities. Next slide. After consultation with communities and consideration for Inuit societal values, we chose a social enterprise model because its goal is to maximize social impact and create positive community change while also being innovative and resourceful. So this is consistent with Inuit societal values. Next slide. For example, as you've seen from previous, the caring for the community and the environment. Next slide. And being innovative and resourceful. So these are just highlighting a couple of the Inuit societal values that are really consistent with a social enterprise approach to offering environmental monitoring services in northern communities. Next slide. As it happened several years later, ITK, or the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, the National Inuit Organization in Canada, it published their National Inuit Strategy on Research. And you could also use the word monitoring there. So the National Inuit Strategy on Research and Monitoring. And in this strategy, They included 5 priority action areas for promoting respectful and beneficial research and monitoring for and with Inuit communities. And the hope here is that this will also help to reduce social inequities that are recognized and documented in northern communities. So I want to go through each of these and sort of show you foundations for SmartICE operations. Next slide. So the first one of these, advance Inuit governance and research. For SmartICE, this really starts at the community level, where in the communities where we operate, we establish community management committees who basically help advise and guide all of the operations of SmartICE in the community. So it gives them that decision-making role. And in fact, here, Ikpiarjuk, last night, we held our community management committee meeting where we got great advice and they approved some additional projects that we're doing here in the community with some partners. But it also extends right up to our board of directors, which currently are 50% Indigenous, and our goal over the next couple of years is to be 100% Indigenous. Next slide. Building the second action area is build capacity in Inuit Nunangat research and monitoring. I mean, as you can see, as a work integration social enterprise, this is just a natural part of our programs. But right now, 80% of our staff in SmartICE are Indigenous, and in communities, 100% of our staff are Indigenous. And as I said before, this is really important because so many of the community are young youth that are under 25 years of age. Next slide. The third priority area is ensure Inuit access, ownership, and control over data and information. The data we collect for the community is protected, but publicly available on Siku. Siku is the Indigenous social networking platform that you can access through Google. You have to register there and make a commitment that you will respect the knowledge of the communities on that site. But also any of the ice travel safety products that we make, like the travel hazard map that you see here, or the terminology booklets, always have an acknowledgement in them that shows that this information is owned by and shared by our community management committee and the communities that we work with. Next slide. The fourth priority action area is align funding with Inuit research priorities. Of course, SmartICE is not a funding agency as such, but we pursue funding to address the community priorities for technology and other projects. So it's really important to us that we're driven by those community research committees' priorities. And in that sense, any funding we receive is automatically aligned with those community priorities. Next slide. The last priority action area is enhance the ethical conduct of research. And of course, by responding directly to these community information needs, we feel that that is an important ethical sort of foundation for SmartICE. And of course, as a social enterprise, which in itself is ethically responsible in the sense of maximizing social impact and creating positive change in the communities, we feel that we're trying to pursue this action area as well. Next slide. So thank you for your attention and coming to the webinar this afternoon. We look forward to answering some of your questions. And I already saw one in the chat where somebody, Vincent, was asking about whether we're going to be in Nunavik. In fact, we hope to, in the next ice season, to be demonstrating SmartICE in one or two Nunavik communities. And please reach out to me for more information. We're just starting that process right now. But I'll throw it back to Jeanette, who I think is going to moderate the questions, and then pass back to Madeline. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Trevor, and your team across the Arctic. This has been extraordinarily informative. And certainly with your use of photos and the videos, it really helps to give a sense of your work. And hello to the team there. Nice to meet everyone. What I might do for those of you that are on video here, if I can ask people to go to the chat, those who wish to, and simply indicate where you are at the moment, because it's always interesting to see where our audience is. We have a large turnout for this group, so I expect we'll have lots from Ottawa and Reykjavík, but I'm curious if there's some other places. Oh, Paris, well, that's exciting. Akureyri, Toronto, Isafjordur. I'm curious if we might have some from Greenland, because I think this is a very timely conversation. Inuvik, here we go, Montreal, Quebec City, Fairbanks, St. John's, Newfoundland, Yellowknife, Calgary, Carbonear, Newfoundland, Saskatoon, St. John's, a village located in the northeastern tip. Oh, wow, in Iceland. I've never heard of that village. Okay, there's somewhere I need to visit. Caledon, Ontario, Yellowknife, PEI, Hola, welcome. Harstad, thanks. St. John's, Ottawa. Okay, so in the United States, we have Maine, USA. Great, excellent. Well, that's a really nice turnout. So thanks for letting me know where everyone is coming from. I know there's many questions on the line. So what I think I might do is ask if there's anyone who actually wants to come on video to start our question. Per, do we have capacity for people to ask questions directly, or is it better that they indicate them in the chat and then I read them out?
People can join on video if they'd like to.
Okay, so maybe I'll start with that, and let's just see if someone appears on video. And of course, no one is forced to do so, but it's always great if you are on video. Please introduce who you are and where you're from, and that would be great for a starter. I know there's a few questions that have come up in the chat, so those can also come up again, because I think I've lost them in the chat.
And if they would like to go on video, just raise their hand, and then Jeanette, you can go from there.
I'm not sure if I can see hands being raised. That's the only problem. While we're waiting to see about questions, I will say whether, oh, I see Linda has a question. Is that your hand up, Linda?
You have to unmute, Linda.
Yeah, got it. Hi, can you hear me now?
Clearly.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Linda Lundstrom in Caledon, Ontario, and I have a question, two questions. Number one, in the community, when they had to create visuals like drawings and that to demonstrate for the terminology what everything meant, did they use people in the community to make those drawings? Or how did that happen? And my second question is, I missed the very first part. Is this who are the stakeholders in this SmartICE program in terms of funding? Thank you.
So I'll answer the last question first, and then I'm going to throw your first question over to Catherine and Andrew, who are directly involved with the work in Mittimatalik. SmartICE is a social enterprise that was created in response to community priorities for some sort of ice monitoring to help them adapt to changing sea ice conditions because of changing climate and society. So in that sense, all of our communities, and we're now working with over 30 communities across Inuit Nunangat and the Northern Territories, they are the ones who are our partners in this project. And as a non-profit social enterprise, all of course, we don't have owners or stakeholders in the enterprise. All of the communities are really the people who make up SmartICE. So now I'm going to ask Catherine and Andrew if they want to come on and just answer that question about illustrations of the ice terminology.
Thanks for the question, Linda. Yes, the art is all we hire locally based on feedback from the community artists. So for Mittimatalik, we hired Jamesi Itulu, and his work was exceptional. And he sat in on all the meetings and listened to the elders describing the words, and so often he would just draw as he was listening in. Andrew, did you want to add anything to that? Thumbs up from Andrew. Thank you.
Next question.
I'll ask one of the questions that's in the chat. What are the resources you needed to document the terminology? And is there an online library which can be accessed?
Well, maybe I'll throw that over to Catherine and Andrew again and just explain it from the context of Mittimatalik and now the other communities that we're expanding to for that project.
Andrew, do you want to explain a little bit about how the workshops happened?
Sure thing. You can hear me fine?
Yes, we
Great.
can.
The way the terminology worked out was it wasn't a one-day meeting. It was a continuous meeting with local hunters and local elders and making sure that we are getting the spelling correctly and the definition correctly. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Andrew. So yeah, it was a workshop where we had cards, big cards, where we would talk about the sea ice, and every time a word came up, that word would get written down, and we talk about the definition. So the resources were very minimal in a sense. And then, we spent several times finding photos and making drawings and starting to put the booklet together. So really the big resources tend to be more around funding for artists and then layout and of the booklet and printing. Currently, there is not an online library that is going to be accessed. We hope to have the terminology available online in the future because it's going to be a living document that we'll continue to add to.
And I'd just add that Catherine and Andrew are making a 100-page booklet for every household in Mittimatalik to share this knowledge. And at no time did that knowledge have to leave the community because we trained Andrew to do all of the map making and the layout and all of those sorts of things. And that's really important that ownership and information stays in the community with the community. Next question, Jeanette, if you have one.
Sure, Trevor, there's another one here on the chat, and then I'm going to see if there's one more person that wants to do a video question before we move to our closing remarks. So the question is, how does SmartICE contribute to efforts for climate change? How do communities in Nunainguk feel with continued reports of sea ice thinning and yearly sea ice loss?
Well, I think I'm going to obviously throw this open to Andrew and Rex, if you want to come over and talk about how do communities feel about the changing ice conditions in your community and what impacts that have for you. But you'll have to come over closer to the microphone and you need to take off your mask as well. But I think what does SmartICE do? I mean, obviously we are we're an adaptation tool that tries to help communities adapt to these unprecedented, unpredictable conditions using both technology and their own Inuit knowledge. So that in itself is really important. It is an action-oriented project. It's responding directly. We are also, though, through the documentation of the sea ice conditions across all of these communities from year to year to year, we're also building a record of sea ice change that has never been done before. And that will be really important for the communities in documenting for themselves what they've observed, but also really being able to show governments just how much it's changing in their communities. Rex is here from Nain and Nunainguk to talk a little bit about how his community thinks about sea ice change.
You just want to quickly go over that question so I understand it?
Do you want to repeat the question, Jeanette? You're muted.
Go. Sorry. How does SmartICE contribute to efforts for climate change? How do communities in Nunangat feel with continued reports of sea ice thinning and yearly sea ice loss?
So, in Nunangut, we see climate change, in my opinion, a lot more than other communities are seeing. We're seeing with climate change, it's not getting as cold as it used to in the winters. So the ice is taking longer to form. And when it finally does, it's not as thick as it used to be in previous years. And, towards the end of the spring, because the ice is not as thick as it was, it'll melt faster. And, we rely on it. It's been said a million times, and I'll say it a million times, the sea ice is our highway to access food. We have to go out and hunt seal and caribou and go fishing. It helps offset the high cost of living when we can travel on the sea ice. And when the sea ice is not safe to travel, people won't do it. And it just leads to the cost of living being that much more expensive. Same thing, in Labrador, where we can go get wood in our communities. If people can't safely get the wood again, it'll just it just adds to the cost of living. So the sea ice, with climate change happening the way it is, it's just going to add to the cost of living for everything for every Inuit person in their communities. And it's a loss of culture. If we can't travel to our hunting grounds, to our fishing grounds, to our traditional lands, we're losing our culture. I say the ice isn't a part of our culture. It is our culture. So the loss of the sea ice, it's really going to affect our culture.
Thanks for that added comment. I don't see anyone waving at me on the screen with a final question on the screen. So I think, given that we are literally moments away from the end of our hour, I'm going to ask if I could turn the microphone back to Madeline to provide some wrap-up remarks, concluding remarks, and then after Madeline, Iceland's ambassador to Canada, Ambassador Hlynur Gudjonsson, will give you a little bit of a taste of what's to come in terms of our webinar series. Over to you, Madeline. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. So today we brought together a diversity of experts, Inuit and as well as non-Inuit, and different ways of knowing, in hopes that we can work together and create a foundation that will work and continue to create the support of unique insights. The conversations we heard today with SmartICE have unlocked new opportunities for learning, furthering our insight of Inuit knowledge and values and our connection to Western science practices. Throughout this presentation, it's clear that the goal of SmartICE is to support the sharing of IQ, Inuit knowledge, and making those connections and bonds between our different generations. Those connections between the generations, especially as they relate to traditional knowledge, is a powerful tool to maintain and strengthen Indigenous culture, as we heard repeatedly, today, how important that is. Teachings between sort of our own people and with scientists, and our language. My internet is unstable. Climate change is being experienced at an unprecedented and increased rate in the north. Knowing that SmartICE and the community members have put Uqsuqtuuq, or innovation and resourcefulness, at the core of their work, showcases the positive atmosphere for fostering creative problem solving in a constantly changing environment. Thank you to all the folks who organized this today. Thank you to SmartICE for this initiative and the insightful conversation that we had today. I encourage you all to share what you've learned with your friends and family and colleagues. And again, thank you for a very interesting and informative session. I'll hand it over to the Icelandic ambassador for his closing words. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline, and thank you everyone for attending. And again, thank you Polar Knowledge Canada and the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network, as well as SmartICE for a great discussion and very informative. Our next event in the series, we are celebrating the 75-year anniversary of diplomatic ties between Iceland and Canada. Then our next event is on Iceland, or Canadian Icelandic literature on May 18. And then we continue with our Science in the Arctic series on September 22nd on innovation and food security, and November 17 on climate science. Everyone, thank you so much for attending, and have a great day.